This podcast contains spoilers, so listen at your own risk or call back after you've watched the movie.
You know who you call. Leave a message. Maybe they'll call you back. Then again, maybe they won't.
We're having ourselves quite a little game of phone tag here.
Ring. I usually get this guy's answering machine.
I'll call you right back.
If you're there, please pick up the phone. I really want to talk to you.
I check my fucking messages every day when I come home from work. My answering machine, zero. I got a blinking light.
All I have to do is pick up this phone right here, inform the cinema, and your plan's kaput.
No, I ain't got no phone. I had to pull, because people calling all the time, and who needs the aggravation, right? Interruptions.
Hey man, following the tail end of our conversation of Dead Reckoning, I've watched Mission Impossible 2. I thought I hadn't seen it since it initially come out, but I think I seen it one more time after that. So maybe this is my third time seeing it, but not in at least 20 something years. Let me just set a scene for you. A scene full of maybe unconfirmed trivia, but I was just looking up about the movie after watching it, and so this is this movie's legacy. Now, these aren't fact checked, but it's interesting. So Doug Ray Scott, who plays Sean Ambrose in this movie, was going to play Wolverine in X-Men the same year, and Mission Impossible 2 went over schedule, and Hugh Jackman got the role. Now, who knows if it's true, but let's say it is. Because Mission Impossible 2 went over budget, Candy Newton, as I call her, I don't know the pronunciation properly, she was forced to drop out of Charlie's Angels. Ian McKellen was offered the Anthony Hopkins role in this movie, but he couldn't do it because he had a theatre gig in London at the time. Had he done it, he would have not been able to play Gandalf because of the production running over in Mission Impossible 2. So that will tell you the things at stake had this movie not being shot by John Woo and taken over by Tom Cruise, by all accounts, in the editing room and whatnot. We might have had a completely different fabric of reality. I would argue a much worse one. And that's one of the few positive things I can say about this movie. That's not quite true, but we sprung upon an interesting conversation in The Final Reckoning in terms of Tom Cruise's on-screen romances, especially in the Mission Impossible movies, and how they don't really go there, and his relationship with the Rebecca Ferguson character, and the kiss that was edited out. Then there's a hint of something with Hayley Atwell, and it never really goes there. Obviously, with Rebecca, it's not Rebecca, is it? Michelle Monaghan. I thought she did very well as his love interest, as his wife, but that's a different type of role. I'm not saying a wife isn't the love interest, but it's a different type of thing, isn't it? I would argue that we got the answer to our question as of why we haven't seen that in a big way in Mission Impossible movies since. And that is because of this movie. I really hated the love angle in this movie, and it is love because you're meant to buy it an extremely profound connection. Tandy Newton is not a good actress, I don't think. She's never won me over. In this, she's particularly bad. The chemistry between her and Tom Cruise is weird. It's probably got some of the most sexually charged stuff in a Mission Impossible movie, which isn't saying much. It's one scene where she says, "Do you mind if I go on top?" while they're trying to break into a safe. That's pretty risque for the franchise. And I think this movie falls apart from the very beginning based on the believability of their relationship and based on the chemistry. And whatever you want to say about Dead Reckoning Part 1, and whatever you want to say about the rom-com type of chase scenes and whatnot, this is way worse than that in those elements, and you cannot convince me otherwise. And the fact that a lot of the movie is built around this ridiculous love story and this ridiculous connection between these two characters is just vomit inducing. Now, I really like the Jerry Maguire Tom Cruise, the Magnolia Tom Cruise. I guess there's a bit of it in The Last Samurai where there's this bags of smiley charisma. Well, maybe not in The Last Samurai actually, but there's something of a Leotari or whatever you call it, a Don Juan about Tom Cruise's persona. There's something about the Ethan character, especially probably because Mission Impossible 1 has already been established, that him smiling and trying to be smoldering, which he's managed to pull off in other movies, just does not work for this character and does not work for this movie at all. And this is probably the best time that I could come to Mission Impossible 2 after seeing the bloated Final Reckoning Part 1 and the Dead Reckoning. Both movies I enjoyed, but it's just the seriousness of it, the epicness, the expansion of the universe. We talked about it before. I was ready to go back to this, have a standalone John Woo type of movie. I wouldn't say I'm a fan of John Woo, but he is someone whose movies I've liked. Better Tomorrow. I think I've seen Hard Boiled a long time ago, so I wouldn't say I'm a fan, but I'm an admirer of his work, and I certainly like the movies in the 90s that I grew up on, such as Face Off, I'm a big fan of, and did he do Snake Eyes, which I really liked when I first seen it. Now, I can't imagine how good it is because it's been a long time, but so he's a guy I like. And I prepared myself and I knew what type of movie I was going to watch in that way. And when we get the opening scene, or maybe it's not the opening scene, but the opening scene on the mountains, which is actually a very good scene where Tom Cruise is climbing the mountain, free soloing. That's actually a good moment for the Ethan Hunt character in this. You get the impression that even though he's on holidays, that he still seeks that type of adrenaline. I think this is the only movie where he's actually working for the IMF the whole movie as well, in the whole franchise, which says something. So I like that scene. And when we get the mission torpedoed and he puts on the sunglasses, this is very late 90s, early 2000s type of cool, which is both bad and good. I lived through the era, so some of the callbacks and some of the things I enjoy personally because of who I am, but I imagine if my partner seen it, she would think this is very cheesy. And when he takes off the shades and throws the sunglasses at the camera almost, and we get this big explosion, which is crazy because I don't know why that particular tape is exploding. And we get this title card smashing like Microsoft art at the time, Mission Impossible 2. I knew what type of movie I was in for, and I'm trying to get on board at this point. And I am on board in the sense that, okay, this is going to be goofy, this is going to be 90s cool, which is now cheesy in a way, but not quite cheesy to me. So, okay. And to the credit of the movie, I did like the initial story of what's his name? Sean Ambrose impersonating Ethan on the plane. I thought that was quite good. And in a better movie, I would have liked to see more of that. In fact, it's very face off now that I think of it. Literally face off. It's fucking mask off. So I actually liked that. I thought that was good. That got me. And we get this scene where he has to recruit the Tandy Newton character, and we get Smoldering Cruise, we get that Mr. and Mrs. Smith, all that rapidly took me down a peg or two with the movie. Then we get the scene of them in the car, and we get this ridiculous scene where they spin around, and we get this slow-mo. And this would start a reoccurring theme that I would start to feel throughout this movie. That is ridiculous. This is stupid. But you know what? Kind of like the shot. that will creep in from time to time. And the movie goes a long time without any action. Now, there's not so much action in the first movie either, although it's that type of Crimson Tide type of action where it doesn't need to be actual action to feel like action, if you know what I mean. Well, this I made a note that there's very little action in this movie, and for a while there's not, and it's sorely lacking. And this movie does a thing that a lot of sequels did in the 90s that I'm glad some movies have got away from. And that is, oh, you like the Langley sequence in the last movie? Well, we're going to give you a Langley sequence that's not as good, but just seems more crazy in this. And they almost forget that the stakes and the conception of the lead up to the Langley scene is not what made it good. And the leaning down on the cable was just icing on the cake. Whereas in this, we get the scene where Tom Cruise jumps from a building through a fan, and it's lacking all the cool build up and tension and the sweat and the things that can go wrong, in favor of people missing the point that, you know what you really liked? You liked the cable. That's what you liked. Like we often say, it's the yippee-ki-yay without the context of the yippee-ki-yay. You like this? And yeah, there's a lot of that. And I think John Woo misunderstands at times what's great about Tom Cruise, so much so to the point, and I know this is a trademark of John Woo, but he misunderstands a lot of Cruise, how to get the best out of him, so much that there is a scene where Tom Cruise does his trademark running, and it's slow-mo. And that's how much of a mismatch in many ways that the pair are. And there's certain things in this movie that, with the passage of time, make the Ethan Hunt character in many ways feel like the harshest version of the character we've seen in Mission Impossible 2, which in retrospect I liked. Maybe at the time it was just that was the cultural thing at the time. But now watching it back, he basically has to pimp out Tandy Newton's character to go undercover and sleep with her ex-boyfriend, and that is basically his mission that's entrusted by Anthony Hopkins at one point. And he, even though he objects to it, he is complicit in it happening. And that's quite a I don't want to say dark scene, but that's certainly the type of thing you wouldn't see in the later Mission Impossibles that I appreciated about this. And there's another scene, that's a little bit ridiculous, but it's quite good, that Tom Cruise switches the mask with the henchman, Mr. Stamp, and it's actually, I mean, it's such a ridiculous scene, but at the same time, he puts the Tom Cruise face on Mr. Stamp, and then the main bad guy thinks that's Tom Cruise and kills him. But meanwhile, Tom Cruise has the henchman's mask on, and he's smiling and he's looking sinister. And I know he has to do that as pretending to be the henchman, but it's just the way that the camera shows it. It's quite sadistic, which is pretty cool. And you'll get something that you would never get in latter Cruise movies, and that is, we get the actor who played the henchman doing the run for a little while. Yeah. And it's just ridiculous. There's so much ridiculous stuff in this movie. And it is so jarring from Mission Impossible 1 to see Ethan Hunt doing some of the things he's doing and acting the way he's doing. That's very much a John Woo joint. But at a certain point, when the action started going into full flow, I started to enjoy the movie more for what it was. And apparently there was quite a battle in this movie between John Woo wanting a stuntman to do the stunts and Tom Cruise saying, nah, fuck that, you wouldn't be able to get the shot. And apparently John Woo's also afraid of heights. So you can just imagine the conflict between these two people. And yeah, just at a certain point, it's probably when Tom Cruise is breaking into the compound when we see all the pigeons and everything like that, and there's a scene when he's trying to do some espionage, sneaking around, and he comes across this guard, and instead of taking out the guard, he does a somersault luchador like move. And it's funny because this is the smallest, most ninja-like Tom Cruise has ever looked, which is great because he is 5'7", and a lot of movies are shot to protect the fact that he's that small. But in this, at times, he's almost like Wolverine from the comics with his ninja type stuff. Considering he's somebody who's played Jack Reacher, this is the smallest, most cat-like he'd ever looked. So yeah, there's a scene where he does this triple flip, sunset flip they would have called it in wrestling, I believe, and this lands his leg and takes out this guy. Around that time, I started to enjoy the film for what it was, and I really did like the fight scenes, and I wish more martial arts movies would do these type of combat. Now, admittedly, some of the fights went on for a little bit too long, but you know, we watch a movie, think, what's that movie you didn't like from that Indonesian director? The Night Comes for Us, and even John Wick movies in a way. There's just too much hits and kicks to the point where this person would be mangled. In this, you really saw the interplay and blocking, and almost, maybe MMA is the wrong word, but you saw the art of sparring and the fight where someone would take a chop and then they would lock in this part of their wrist, and it felt a lot more physical and a lot more defensive while still being exhilarating. and even some of the moves like the roundhouse kicks and moves like that, you felt the impact of those moves a lot more than you would in a movie where they take about 60,000 kicks and it just gets all a bit ridiculous. I'm much more a fan of this type of stuff, and it was very refreshing to see. And there is a a scene where all of a sudden Tom Cruise is on a motorcycle and has leather and is looking like Arnie from Terminator. And I'm thinking, where did he get all these clothes? And why is he wearing all these clothes? And I realized, oh wait, that's the clothes the henchman was wearing when he switched masks. So actually, there's a very in film reason for him going around like this. And I couldn't think back to the time in this movie where the henchman did have that letter. Did he have that letter? Maybe he just didn't look as cool in it. And obviously, maybe they changed costume. I don't know. I'd love to go back. And yeah, I really enjoyed the motorbike stuff. I really enjoyed the two-gun Tom Cruise, which of course is a John Woo trademark. After a while, I started warming to that. I mean, it's not a Mission Impossible movie. It's ridiculous. It's a John Woo movie. But I did enjoy seeing Tom Cruise do some cool fucking John Woo stuff, like kicking up a gun from the sand, close combat, roundhouse kicks, and diving past motorbikes. And there is some other ridiculous stuff that happens in this movie where he just goes on the back wheel of his motorbike to make dust, or make smoke, so the character played by Tom Cruise's cousin, they fly into a truck and there's massive explosion. That's like something straight out of Coyote and Roadrunner. And you know, J.J. Abrams did do the third the third Mission Impossible, if I'm not mistaken. I would like to think that Tom Cruise's cousin was working on Lost and then introduced Tom Cruise to J.J. Abrams, and that's how we got Mission Impossible 3 in my head. His cousin isn't bad, actually, as a henchman in this either. Which brings me probably to the movie's most glaring problem, and that is, I mean, it's got many, but the bad guy is really, really bad. I mean, give me the Entity over this guy. I never thought I would say it, but give me the Entity. How I longed for the days of the Entity over this bad guy. He's just so bad, and his line reading is ridiculous. He's got the charisma of a moldy fucking shoe. It turns out years later he actually won an Emmy for some Scottish crime show, so maybe he's improved, or maybe this is just what he was given to do. He's a big problem. He's very bad. For some reason, I was hoping Brendan Gleeson would be the bad guy in this movie, or even give me some Anthony Hopkins, which we never saw again, tune up the scenery. That would have been great as well. Yeah, the bad guy really, really lowers the tone of everything. And any scene he has by himself, or any scene he has opposite Tom Cruise, or any scene he has opposite Tandy Newton is abysmal. It really is. But by the end of the movie, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed a lot of aspects to it. It finished much more strongly than it started. Still the worst Mission Impossible movie, I think. But I'm not as down on it as I initially was. There's some positives there. I really like the Hans Zimmer soundtrack, which is so jarring to what you would normally get in a Mission Impossible movie at this point. It's more like something out of Gladiator, and maybe the soundtrack was solely brought in to try and add some deepness to the whole crappy tango, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, dead fish type of thing we saw between Tandy Newton and Tom Cruise, which seemingly killed any other romance he would have that could possibly be this in future Mission Impossibles. So yeah, I enjoyed the epicness of the soundtrack. There's so many things that were ridiculous, but I also thought were cool, like some of the gun slow-mo shots, the pigeons, the Tom Cruise being followed around by a white pigeon, some of the crazy gun shit he does and the spinning around. I loved all that, but I'm a kid of the 90s. And it's actually made me want to watch Face Off and Snake Eyes again if he did do it. So that's a success in itself. So yeah, interesting to see what you think. Actually, I think I was getting confused. And funny enough, isn't it Brian De Palma that does Snake Eyes now that I think about it? And it's probably Broken Arrow that I'm thinking of. I think it was Hard Target as well. So I retract my Snake Eyes comment. Although I definitely want to watch that as well. From another Mission Impossible alumni.
Yeah, there's kind of a weird symmetry there where in 96 or 97, John Woo does a Nick Cage movie, De Palma does a Mission Impossible movie, and then for both directors, the next film that they follow that up with is what the other one did. So De Palma does a Nick Cage movie and John Woo does a Mission Impossible movie. But I guess they were just like the two big things at the time, so it's kind of coincidence in that regard. But another thing about those two follow-up projects, I would say, for Snake Eyes, because it's got that great opening, really long tracking shot that's like 20 minutes or something, which is genius De Palma, and Mission Impossible has its like incredible motorbike sequence at the end and stuff. Both Mission Impossible 2 and Snake Eyes, you can go to and kind of get your fix for these classic auteurs that we love, but they're also both kind of failures in a way, and like certainly not anywhere near the running of like the essential viewing of that director. So yeah, it's kind of an interesting coincidence there. So I've checked out this movie. I watched it in the cinema when it came out, as I have done, I think, every Mission Impossible movie. I'm pretty sure. Could there be one I missed? No, I've seen them all in the cinema, and it was a huge sensation. I mean, Mission Impossible 2 was such a fucking enormous deal. Such a big movie, such a high profile movie. When you were mentioning, like, I knew that Dougray Scott was in this and therefore didn't play Wolverine. I didn't realize it was because this overran. I thought he turned down Wolverine to do Mission because it would have seemed like a safer bet to be like the baddie in the biggest blockbuster of the year versus act in a comic book movie, which was like seen as a kind of failing like genre or whatever. And then obviously Hugh Jackman's made a whole career out of that performance essentially. But I wasn't aware of the other ones. Thandie Newton being like should have been in Charlie's Angels. I wonder which of the angels she would have been. But this movie, watching it now, is so Charlie's Angels. Like, it's so 2000s pop cool action movie, like super Hollywood, you know, like this. If you think about the MTV Movie Awards, like that kind of movie that epitomizes that era, MI2 is that through and through. And when I saw it in the cinema and then saw it again probably not too long afterwards on home viewing, it was 4 years after the first Mission Impossible, which is 96, I believe. And 4 years for me at that age, I was 14, I believe, when this movie came out. So that means I was 10 when I saw the first Mission in the cinema. So if you think about 4 years now for us is like a blink of an eye. You're like, I can't believe that wasn't last year. But the 4 years between 10 and 14 is a long enough period that I wouldn't really have retained any of Mission Impossible 1 anymore. Like, to me, this movie, Mission Impossible 2, was a standalone thing in a way. Like, of course, I knew it was the sequel to the movie I liked in the past or whatever, but it wasn't, watching it then, it didn't need to stand up to any kind of comparisons to anything. It didn't need to be consistent on a character level for Ethan Hunt. It didn't need to be stylistically consistent between De Palma and John Woo's approaches. It only had to be a film that me as a 14-year-old would go and watch and enjoy. And I did. I remember going to the cinema, enjoying it, having a good time with it. Certainly wasn't like one of my favorite films of the era, but it was a film that I liked. I thought Tom Cruise was cool. Like, I mean, I don't know if it was because of the age I was, if that played a part, but to me, it feels like this is one of the biggest films of that time in terms of like posters and just constant iconography of like Tom Cruise with like the flames behind and that kind of like cool sunglasses, like whether it's the Oakley looking glasses that he puts on at the beginning for the mission, or just sunglasses, and like his long hair that he had in this and Last Samurai. And it was just like such an iconic thing. Even though the movie has certainly fallen out of favor. I don't know if it ever was in favor for like critics or adults and stuff, but like I wouldn't have had any knowledge of that. I would have just been in my little like kind of teen bubble, and for me it was just like amazing. So it's interesting going back and watching it now, and from listening to your voice note, I feel like you're very much watching it through this lens that is almost inescapable now, of like, you have so much context for this franchise, you have so much context for this actor, you have so much context for the director, for the cinema of that era, of like it you know, earlier era, later era, stuff like that. Like this is a movie that we're very well versed in every way that you can kind of look at it and think about it, and it's very, very different holding this film up to that level of interrogation, and even down to, like you said in your voice message there, that you feel like you're coming at this film at kind of the perfect time to come at it, because you've just watched the Reckoning movies and maybe a simple, stripped down, less bloated, more not as serious mission movie could be. Like, that's when it's going to kind of hit best, because it's a breath of fresh air. But I don't know if that's true, really. I think the experience that we had with this film as kids, or certainly I did, I'm not sure if you mentioned if you liked it or not as a kid, but that experience, I think, is peak enjoying this movie, because I think this movie does work best. It's not a great movie, but it works best on its own. And I think there's every Mission Impossible movie, no, not everyone, but probably every mission movie other than the first and the third one is a bit of a mixed bag. Could be great, but still a bit of a mixed bag. Like Fallout, which we both, for both of us, is our second favorite mission movie. It's a great movie. It's a brilliant time. For me, it has absolute dog shit stuff in it that's like terribly bad. And I think a lot of the time for me with the mission movies, because a mission movie does several things, and it doesn't always do all of those things well, and it doesn't always do all of those things even to a consistent level of quality. Like take, for example, plot. The plot might be well in these departments and bad in that department. The action might be phenomenal in this 40 minutes and just mediocre in other parts of it. So it's kind of like every mission movie has a bunch of cards it's going to play. It's going to have plot, dialogue, star power, action, the kind of shock value spectacle element as well. Music, it's got all of these things that it delivers, and like fan service of like the masks, and should you choose to accept it and all that kind of stuff. And it doesn't need, like, you take this one over here, you really like, this one over here, you really like, but you don't like, they're not weighing those elements to the same level, but they both are just kind of doing enough. And so Mission 2, I'd have to think about whether I place it at the bottom. It's certainly in the bottom 3 for me. I think Dead Reckoning, Final Reckoning, and Mission 2, in some order, are the bottom 3 for me. I think all 3 of those movies have great stuff in. I'll go as far as to say great, because I can say that Dead Reckoning has something great in it without in any way implying that it's a great movie. It couldn't be further from a great movie. I mean, it could be further from, it could have nothing great in it, but you know what I mean? You've got a 3-hour movie. If it has a great 50 minutes in it or something, then you know, you point it out and you know, commend it. But I think looking at the stuff that is done well in Mission 2, some of that stuff is done better in this than it is in other Mission Impossible movies, like several elements. So I've watched this over 2 nights. I started watching it last night, watched the first half, and then I was too tired and I was falling asleep. So I paused it and I watched the second half the next day. Now, I mean, that's a lot of what I'm going to say now is going to be built off that experience. And I don't know, because I'm watching it at 2 separate periods, my mood is different. My energy levels are different. My, you know, everything. I just think it's really important when a movie catches you, what kind of headspace you're in. So I don't know how much it's because of that fact that I can say this statement, but I can say that I think the second half of the movie is radically better than the first half of the movie. I agree with your discomfort with the character of Ethan Hunt in this film, but my complaints rest on the first half of the movie, where he's the sort of playboy, smoldering, charming, funny, like having fun, like the stuff. Like, you know, you were saying, like that shot where they're spinning around in the cars. It's a beautiful shot. It's cool. It's awesome. It's brilliant. It's classic John Woo, but it's also like completely ridiculous. And he grabs her as she's about to fall down the cliff. But it's like that smarmy James Bond thing of like, nothing bothers me. Nothing's ever scary. I'm never afraid of another person dying. It's all just, let's have a kiss and it'll be cool. They don't get themselves out of harm's way. They sit in the seat that's still like dangling over. And that type of like death wish type, like I'm immortal, nothing can happen to me because I'm cool and we're kissing kind of thing, which James Bond has been guilty of so many times, and is just such a like, to me that really kills the drama in, well, it drops down the drama. I've seen it in lots of like cheesy 80s and 90s action movies, and it can be fun. Like, it is cool. It's kind of cartoonish, isn't it? It's like Johnny Bravo or something. But if you compare that to the later Mission movies, and by later I would say Mission Impossible 3 onwards, and probably Mission 1 as well, to be fair, every other Mission Impossible movie, there's no fucking way he's having like a kissing scene in that passenger seat of that car while it's hanging off a cliff, because other Mission movies will go, it has to be grounded. The character of Ethan has to be like trying to achieve what's like logically safe and best outcome, not just be, hey man, if it's fun, I'll do it kind of thing. And this movie, it's more like the Fast and Furious franchise a bit, where you do things for like it's worth doing dangerous shit because it's cool and badass, which we know that Tom Cruise actually is kind of has that inclination. But for in the movies, Ethan is never, it's like he's doing the most dangerous stuff all the time whilst trying to avoid danger as much as possible. And that's, you know, that's one element of why the character doesn't work. The sex stuff is like, it really doesn't work. It's weird because I was thinking back at Cruise's career, and obviously sort of like catapulted to superstardom with Risky Business and Top Gun, and like always had in his early movies a romance element. You know, then like mid-90s we're going like Jerry Maguire. Rain Man has a girlfriend character, same with like Color of Money. There's always that that was a big part of it. And then, like you said, he's got the sort of the dark, sexy kind of thing where he's like, he's bad for women, but like they're still playing that up. It's like Interview with the Vampire, Magnolia. And then the interesting break, which is 99, the year before this one, is Eyes Wide Shut, which is with his actual life at the time. And the whole movie is about a character kind of feeling emasculated and like having his potency as a compelling sexual force be called into question and just being like completely fucking like thrown into existential crisis about that. And there is like many rumors about the making of that film and how like well, I to be honest, I'm not going to like go into unsubstantiated rumors, but people made a lot of comparisons between his life and the themes of that film at that time, and I feel like his on-screen validity as a love interest, or whatever you want to put it, like as a womanizer, or even, it doesn't have to be a womanizer, but just like a strong romantic lead. I don't know if it's ever really recovered from that. The other thing, like he's in this movie, MI2, I think he was a year younger than I am now when he made this movie, or at least when it was released. I guess maybe 2 years younger than I am now when he shot it, potentially. I remember when this movie came out thinking he was incredibly cool and like it was a cool character and stuff, but I do slightly remember feeling like maybe he's a bit too old to be doing this kind of thing. Just a hint of that, a hint of like, he's wearing sunglasses, he's on a motorbike and stuff, but he's like an older guy. Now, of course, that's laughable now when you think about the fact that 26 years later, he's still doing this character and he's actually doing way crazier stuff than he's doing in this movie. But I think as his career progresses, and this is going quite far back now, this one's 2000, but I'm talking about movies from like the mid 2000s, the 2010s, obviously more recent films in the 2020s. There's this thing about like, he's never really moved except for in Mission Impossible 3, where the romance stuff works incredibly well. But other than that movie, to my knowledge, he's never really switched out of the boyfriend type young man relationship thing that he was doing in Risky Business and Top Gun and stuff like that. And that becomes increasingly awkward. And then we get this weird thing for the last 10 years where he has these clearly romantic relationships on screen. I mean, certainly in the case of Top Gun Maverick, it's supposed to be taken as a romance. But I would also say in the case of the Mission Impossible movies with Ilsa Faust, that is supposed to be interpreted as it's not just a platonic, they're friends, it is a romantic relationship. But because they don't kiss or have sex or anything, and that's only glaring because if it was any other actor, you would see that. It makes it just, and who knows what, like you mentioned that there was they shot a kiss and it was cut out of the movie with Ilsa Faust. I wondered whether it's the Church of Scientology that has some influence about how things that these kind of elements are represented on screen. I mean, who knows? But there's something there, on either that or it's just like a weird editing coincidence over a decade. But there's something there where like he doesn't, you see that less. And maybe it's because he's super fucking old to be dating like hot 30-year-old girls at this point, and maybe it's tricky to make that work. So yeah, I don't know. But certainly going back to this movie where they are doing the more sexy kind of like James Bond type thing, it really doesn't work. I actually don't think Thandie Newton's a particularly bad actress. I don't think she's a particularly good actress. I think she's just like fine in this movie, but I don't think it's less to me that there isn't much chemistry between them, but it's less like there's a lack of chemistry between them than there's like a lack of it in any way making sense what they're up to. This is again why I've always preferred Mission to James Bond, because I don't want to see when the world's in danger and there's like a fucking biological weapon that's about to be unleashed in the world. I don't want to see him in this like perfect tuxedo, just riffing, playing blackjack. I want someone who's fucking taking this shit seriously. And even though the Mission franchise is still very camp and stuff, it's more felt like his agenda is not just sleeping with loads of women and outwitting people with his like one-liners. It's actually like running to the problem and solving the problem. And this is the film that kind of deviates from that the most, and definitely suffers for it. But as I said, I watched it across 2 nights. Last night was all of that stuff. I stopped watching it after kind of halfway through the scene where they go into the skyscraper and get the weapon, and it kind of like there's a bit halfway through that where the gun, the final bit of virus is on the ground, and Thandie Newton comes out, and I basically had to watch the last 5 minutes like 5 times, kept on falling asleep. I was like, I can't do this. So I just paused it, and then I turned it on again today. Everything I saw today was serious. No cheeky James Bond smarmy bullshit, just serious, like life and death, trying to get the job done. And even the sort of final 15 minutes maybe that I watched last night was getting that energy on. So I think it's front loaded with a lot of like, Ethan's so badass that he's just cool. And, like, I remember when I was a kid watching the rock climbing sequence that happens early in the movie, and I thought it was incredible, and I still think it's incredible. And a lot of the best stuff in this film I can't appreciate now because I already know it's coming. If I saw that rock climbing sequence for the first time now, I'd be like, fucking hell, that looks amazing. It's amazing that we're actually seeing this with a Hollywood actor doing this. I'm sure he's on like safety lines and stuff, but there's still no other actor that we would get these shots of them doing this stuff. It would be composited and it just wouldn't look remotely as good. But still, I knew that was coming. All of the mask gags, you mentioned the one on the plane working for you where we think the doctor is on the plane with Ethan, but actually it's Dougray Scott. That's fucking genius. This film has by far and away the best mask gags of any Mission movie. One of the only ones I can say from my memory that that competes with it is the Prime Minister in Rogue Nation. Also, I think there's a good one with Philip Seymour Hoffman mask in Mission Impossible 3, but this one has about 4 or 5 times where they use the mask thing in a brilliant narrative way, like when Thandie Newton comes outside and Ethan like grabs her and they have a little chat, a little like strategy thing. Okay, now back in with you, but then it's revealed it's Dougray Scott. Or obviously the one near the end where he's the henchman and he sort of like manages to use that as a distraction to grab the 2 things and make Dougray Scott kill his own henchman. Or there's the one where they drug Brendan Gleeson, make him think he's having this fever dream where he's talking to like his old friend that he's killed. And like the mask gags are brilliant in this, but every single one of them, I couldn't have told you that was in the movie 2 days ago, but as I'm watching, as soon as the scene starts, I go, oh yeah. So there's a lot of the best stuff of this film that doesn't work on repeat viewings. And I think a lot of like Mission Impossible movies to me work best on first viewing because they have, ideally, the last 2 don't have this, but ideally they have great plot twists, like great storytelling, and they have like jaw-dropping spectacle, like the rock climbing sequence in the very beginning of this film. And as much as you can go back and watch that stuff and it's still brilliantly made, it loses some of its potency second time round. But that stuff, like the stuff in Seville with Thandie Newton's terrible, although I do really like Anthony Hopkins in this movie in his 2 scenes. The stuff the fact that it's so based around this love story that's completely insubstantiated, and the Dougray Scott, Thandie Newton, Tom Cruise love triangle tension, which is just not one of the better things in the movie, but also that Ethan character in the early parts of this movie get you started on a pretty rough, like, bad foot in a way. But once they go into that lab, now you mentioned that you don't like that it does a callback to the Langley in what's the word, the Langley set piece or whatever. I don't mind that. Mission 3 did it in the Vatican City. I don't know. I go back and forth on that kind of stuff. I find it a bit insufferable in some franchises. Again, James Bond, I think, has sometimes overindulged in that stuff. But I would love to have seen it come back in Final Reckoning, for example. I guess it's a tricky thing because it does break the immersion. Like, the worst part of Alien Romulus is when he says, "Get away from her, you bitch." And it's like, wait, did you watch Aliens or something? But I don't know. I like it. I think it's really the only thing that the two sequences have in common. But as soon as the shit hits the fan in that building and it turns into a shootout where, like, sparks flying everywhere, and you can see that Tom Cruise is literally running through, like, sparks and smoke and stuff like that, and it's gone full John Woo, that's the movie really just kicking into overdrive. And I think it doesn't really let up after that. So you get a really strong final 40 minutes of this film, or 45 minutes, whatever it is. Maybe strong final, I'd say second half, really. Like, it's a second half, I think, is a good movie. And it does have a brilliant action scene at the end with that motorbike chase, which has so much great John Woo stuff. As you said, like, some of the shots in this are brilliant. And if those shots were in a brilliant movie like Face Off, you'd be watching it and be going, oh yeah, that is like peak action filmmaking, because you'd be watching an amazing shot couched within an amazing movie. In this case, you're watching an amazing shot or an amazing action beat in a not particularly great movie. I don't know. I there's loads of movies I like Roadhouse, for example, that are just kind of schlock, but I don't really have a bad word to say about them because they're delivering on their own terms. Now, they're not part of a franchise. They're not immediately held up and compared to very different movies like MI2 is. But if you kind of take MI2 more in the realm of Charlie's Angels, or even, like, remember that show, was it called Fast Lane or something? It was like a show, I think it was made by McGee, and it was around this time. And it was very similar aesthetic to MI2 and Charlie's Angels, like very saturated orangey colors and explosions and like new metal soundtrack and all that. And if you take it as that, like, as one of those movies, I think it's a pretty decent film with just some, like, problems in it. Story-wise, it's got a much better story than Dead Reckoning or Final Reckoning. I mean, I can't believe you said that Dougray Scott was a worse baddie than the Entity. I think, for my money, I don't think it's possible, no matter how many action films you watch across all of action cinema, to find a baddie worse than the Entity. I think the Entity adds literally zero to the film. Now, clearly we feel differently about Dougray Scott. I thought he was fine. I thought he was, probably one of the worst baddies in the franchise, although I can't even remember who the baddie of Ghost Protocol is. So that's kind of just gives you an indication that if they're not, haven't always been great, but I still thought he was all right. I think if he was, being cast in this and X-Men, Hollywood probably had more, like, a bit of unwarranted faith in his star power. Like, I don't watch this and go, it's not like Matthew McConaughey or something. You watch this and you go like, oh man, this is like a star in the making kind of thing. It's very much not that. Like, he's pretty mediocre, but I don't know. I think he's all right. Like, he's supposed to be like creepy, sort of dark, possessive, like abusive boyfriend type character. One thing, he's part of a trope I love, which is the hero is the good agent and then the baddie is the bad agent, which GoldenEye does and Fallout kind of does as well. I always love when it's like the hero's kind of going up against the dark version of himself, which is Face Off is a bit of that as well, where it's like you're almost facing yourself but the worst version of yourself in a way. So I know that's nothing to do with Dougray Scott because that's the script, but he is sort of like playing into that a bit, especially in the sense of like him and Tom Cruise both are very drawn to Thandie Newton, and they're both top agents with like incredible power to like get shit done, but one's using that for evil and the other one's using that for good kind of thing. So I think that works, but I also think the plot, like having recently watched the Reckoning movies, because the Reckoning movies, they don't write the plot until after they finish shooting all the action. So when you're in the action, they don't know what they're doing. Watching this movie now, where they've had a story, which is like there's two drugs or whatever the correct, two serums that are made or are going to be made and that are changing hands and that are like kind of the MacGuffins of the movie, and one of them is the sickness and the other one is the cure, and if it goes out, these are the world implications, and if it all gets destroyed, then this will be this. If someone ends up with just the cure, then that will be that, and this he has to sell it, or he has to get the funds together before this, and then like Thandie Newton's able to come in and take the MacGuffin but actually inject it into herself, which is like massive story implications. If you strip all that story out, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying this is like the best story ever. It's not like Casablanca or something. I'm saying that compared to the Reckoning movies, where they don't have any of that, they don't have the benefit of like, we can't shoot that thing, or we can't shoot her because she's got the thing in her, or this thing that she has won't have any value until we get this thing, and how are we going to get this? We have to go into it's an actual plot. The romance stuff and the Thandie Newton stuff is not a plot. I mean, it is a plot. It's stupid. It's stupid that like this guy's whole, that the weak point of his whole like meticulous plan is that he's just like so in love with this girl that he'll kind of allow a chink in his armor. That's stupid. But the biological weapon thing, I think, is much more compelling and creates much more drama within each scene than just basically having nothing, which is the whole way through the Reckoning movies. I basically feel like the heroes have to get out of here, the good, like it's all just a bit too nebulous. And even the intentionality of the baddie, where he's like, I'm morally unscrupulous because I'm willing to unleash this weapon and create a horrific situation for humanity so that I can, by being the primary shareholder in this pharmaceutical company, become rich off the cure. Like that's much more compelling than in the Reckoning movies. You actually never find out really what the baddies want, in a sense. Like the entity wants to basically just launch all the nukes and kind of zero out society in a way, but it's just that it's all you get that they have to stop it because nukes are going to go off, but there isn't any characterization of the entity at all there that's interesting. That, I don't know, it's the cheapest form of action storytelling, which is like, bomb's going to go off unless we do the thing. And this movie has a lot more story depth than the Reckoning movies, which is damning with faint praise, but it is the case for me. It's also interesting you mentioned that Ian McKellen wasn't able to do this movie so that he could do Lord of the Rings. Is that what you said? Because Ian McKellen was also in X-Men, but I guess he's in it for such a small amount, or a relatively smaller amount than Hugh Jackman, that maybe those films conflicting wasn't an issue. I've just looking over some of the notes I took on your voice note there. You mentioned like the slow-mo shots. So this is obviously very, very much a John Woo movie. I, like you, am a big fan of his work. Face Off, I would say, is very much a contender for best action film ever made for me. It's obviously his best American movie, and it is a phenomenal film, like an absolutely phenomenal film. Broken Arrow, I like a lot, and Hard Target, I like a lot, but they're actually probably similar quality level than Mission Impossible 2 in a way. Like they're both kind of mixed bags of good stuff and bad stuff. But maybe I've got more affection for them than Mission Impossible 2, because I guess Mission Impossible 2 is like the redheaded stepchild of like a franchise that I love. And it's just like, oh, it's the one that sort of failed to deliver on what the other ones were delivering on. But now that they've muddied up the water with the Reckoning movies, I care less about that. It's like for ages, like Mission Impossible 2 was like the one that let it down. And now it's like, well, you know, there's several things it does better than the Reckoning movies. For starters, it's an hour shorter than the Reckoning movies. And yeah, I don't know, there's probably much more I could say, but the John Woo's early stuff that he's obviously, you know, in many people's eyes, a complete legend for, his Hong Kong movies, there's action sequences in those films that I adore. The drama, and it's similar in a way to the romance stuff between Tom Cruise and Thandie Newton. The character drama stuff, which is a huge part of those old John Woo movies, to the point where some of them don't even have action in, they're just a character drama. That stuff I've never liked, really. Like, I might find a way to get into that. Maybe I'm just not understanding what the appeal is, but I've never liked his character work other than in Face Off, where it's amazing. But it's still laughable in Face Off, all the stuff of like where he's like stroking his kid's face and stuff like that. That's like, it's crazy over the top and just so weird, but it works because Travolta and Nicolas Cage are so amazing. And I guess they sort of have the right energy for this, for that kind of like weird soap opera shit that he likes to do. But yeah, he's always been a bit of a mixed bag director for me. And there's a few films of his I haven't seen that I'd really like to see as well. But this one, it's partly, it's, you know, produced by Tom Cruise. It's a big Hollywood studio blockbuster. I think Woo has talked many times, and certainly Jackie Chan has talked many times about like the difference between like the production difference between Hong Kong cinema and Hollywood cinema, in terms of like the amount of time you have to do things, and just it's so different making a movie in Hollywood that there's no reason to think that you'd be able to achieve the same things, except John Woo did manage to make a great action movie in Face Off, and he does deliver great action here and there in Mission Impossible 2. But it's a weird mesh between not having Woo's identity at all, and then like certain sequences and certain like slow-mo shots, and obviously the pigeons and the two-handed gunplay, and just various parts of it are like, couldn't be more John Woo. The two cars spinning around and slow motion hair flying and looking at each other, and some of the shots are even that thing where like they haven't even shot it with a high-speed camera, they're just doing that slowed down sort of like jumpy frame by frame thing that he does in a lot of his movies. So I think it's got, there's parts of the film that are like, this is brilliant that John Woo made this film, and then there's parts of the film that are like, this is suffering because John Woo made the film. You also mentioned the sort of lack of action in the middle of the movie, which is a weird thing, isn't it? Like it starts off with the plane sequence, and then we don't get action for a very long time. We get the rock climbing scene, we get the Seville mission debriefing, we get the the party with Thandie Newton. I guess then we get that car chase scene, but it's more that rom-com acting of Night and Day, where it's rather than like a proper big mission action scene. So it's kind of like a little action snippet, but it's not a big thing. Then we get like, you know, more Anthony Hopkins, and then dropping her off at the house or whatever, like with Dougray Scott's house, and then the race, like the racehorse sequence, which is more of a like tense, it's like Hitchcockian sequence rather than a action scene. And then, you know, Ethan in quotes showing up at the house and having that meeting with her. Of course, it's really Dougray Scott. And it's not until that shootout up in the skyscraper, because we even get I think we get some more Brendan Gleeson before that as well. It's not until that action sequence in the skyscraper that we're back into full-blown action again with guns. And so you've got about 45 minutes, I'd say at least, stretch in this film, maybe 50 minutes, which doesn't really have proper full-blown action scenes. And I think the film is really, really hurt by that. I guess, as you said, the first Mission movie wasn't a pure action fest. A lot of it was tension, like the Langley sequence is not an action sequence, but it's phenomenal. And it's like one of the best scenes, probably the best scene in the whole franchise. So I get kind of the thinking, but this is John Woo, and it's the action in this movie that finally makes it hit home. I was a bit restless in the first half of the movie. By the end of the movie, I don't know about you, but I was very satisfied because I had just seen sort of top-notch action. I don't know that it stands up to the Eurostar sequence that ends the first movie, but it might do. I mean, the first movie is a great movie, and this is a mediocre movie. So you're in a different level of investment, maybe, and you're just more favorable to the movie. But if you just take that away and you look at that whole motorbike sequence, like the fact that you can see it's Tom Cruise on the motorbike for so much of it massively adds to it. The like smashing cars into other cars. I think it's hurt a bit that this whole film, or almost the whole film, is set in Australia. Not even in Sydney. It's just like, you know, so Australian suburbs or something. Funnily enough, I think one of the Police Story movies is set in Australia as well. And it's like, I don't know what it is, but I really don't find Australia exotic at all. I mean, it seems to be like a lovely place to live and everything, but comparing that to where the Mission movies have been set over the years, it's usually somewhere that's a lot more exotic. Same with James Bond movies, like you get these great settings, and I think Australia just seems like a bit of a weird choice. And we get the Australian team member that doesn't carry through. Luther is here back again. Nice to see Luther young after watching him, you know, on death's door in the final reckoning. But the other guy, yeah, I'm not surprised that I didn't recognize that face. I think he'd probably like graduated from Neighbours to Mission Impossible 2 and then went straight back to Neighbours again. But yeah, this final action sequence is amazing, but it would probably be a lot cooler if it was in like Paris or Delhi or something like that. But it's just in like the Australian suburbs, so that hurts it a bit. Yeah, what else have we got here? Yeah, you mentioned that it's kind of like the darkest Ethan in a way, because it's, you know, to me, the fact that he goes along with a plan for Thandie Newton to be put essentially in harm's way with this like abusive, scary ex, to me, that's not. I bought that in the film in this because he fights it so hard and he's so pissed off, and I think, could be wrong, could be I was quite tired when I was watching this scene, but I think he sort of explains the situation to her, and she's like, I want to do this. And a lot of the film is like Ethan Hunt not like forcing her into things, like not not creating that power dynamic, and Dougray Scott trying to create that power dynamic, but her always asserting her autonomy and her power. And that's very much the case in that scene where she injects herself with the chemical or whatever, chimera. So that bit I didn't think, but certainly the fact that he's just constantly shooting people, and particularly the bit where he kills where he makes Dougray Scott kill his henchman. I get what he manages to achieve out of that, but it is a darker Hunt. The John Woo movies in general, like The Killer and stuff, they always seemed different to Hollywood movies in just how many people that the hero killed. Like in a Hollywood movie, it's usually, I'll kill a baddie if I have to, if they're in my way, and it's my only, like, that's the only way I can escape. The John Woo movies always felt a bit more, they had a darker edge to them, because it just felt like the hero has to murder about 700 people. It's not that they're a sadistic, like, it's not that they're an anti-hero or something, but the whole, like, concept of the movie is like, let's flood this environment with as many evil henchmen as possible. So he's just killing someone every 10 seconds. And at a certain point, you're sort of like, Jesus Christ, like, does he need to kill that many people? And this is the only mission movie where Tom Cruise, I mean, I don't know this for a fact, but I'm very confident that this is the highest death count at the hands of Ethan Hunt directly of any mission movie. So yeah, it does have a darkness that's, again, it weakens the character a bit over the more empathetic, good, like trying to do the right thing Ethan that's worked really well across the other movies. And yeah, with all that said, I like this movie now. I'll definitely say that. I think Dead Reckoning for me is probably the low point, because I think that train sequence at the end of Dead Reckoning, where they're like having to climb up the train while it falls off the cliff, is really good. But we're talking about 10 minutes of really good in an almost 3-hour movie. I think Dead Reckoning, the rest of the film, like for example, the long car chase in Rome, which is the biggest action sequence in the movie, I don't think that's as good as the action in Mission Impossible 2, in this sort of second half of Mission Impossible 2, like specifically the motorbike sequence. I think the plot is radically better than Dead Reckoning, because Dead Reckoning is half a movie, or like a quarter of a movie really, and a movie, it just doesn't have a plot. It's got, I honestly, Dead Reckoning might have the worst script I've ever seen because of how long it is. It's that bad, and it's that nothingy, and it's that like all over the place, and it's 3 hours. Like that's a rough ride. This one's much better in that department. I think it's got lots of cool iconic stuff, like the mountain climbing sequence at the beginning. I think all of the mask gags are brilliant. I think I'm someone who's of an age where I have nostalgia for like new metal and like cool 2000s stuff, like Oakley sunglasses and stuff like that. And seeing all that in this movie gives it a style. It's not evergreen like Mission Impossible 1, but Dead Reckoning just feels like it's got no specific style. It's not like shot in a particular way, or the score is like going for a particular energy. So it's just like very dull, Dead Reckoning. So I think the question for me is, Dead Reckoning is the worst one, and which is the second worst? That's what it is. It's to me. And I think I probably have to say that this is the second worst, because I think Final Reckoning it fixes for me a lot of the issues of Dead Reckoning. And it has, like Mission Impossible 2, got some great sequences. But I think it's the reason why you might argue for Mission Impossible 2, or the reason you might argue for Final Reckoning as being better, are different reasons. They're doing different things right. But it's nice to revisit because the other ones I'm very familiar with, and it still doesn't fit into the franchise that well. But now the franchise has got a bit more chaotic and messy, so it matters less. Just another point on the new metal. Now, this isn't new metal, but Metallica are in the end credits, a song that's very similar to Enter Sandman. That's not from any album. It was just a single for Mission Impossible 2. And it's a tiny bit of new metal. Like it's more like classic Metallica stuff, but you can see it sort of fits in with like obviously Limp Bizkit did the theme tune for the movie and stuff like that. That song is one of the most important and most historic songs in music history, because I don't know if you remember when Napster came out and suddenly we could all get like any song we wanted for free. Metallica started hearing that song, again, this shitty Metallica song that was made as a single for Mission Impossible 2. They started hearing that song on the radio and they were like, we haven't even released that song. They realized that like a demo had leaked to Napster and then it was, spreading all over the world. So they sued Napster and they became the first musical group to ever sue online piracy. And, I think Lars Ulrich became sort of like the face of anti-piracy for years to come. I always knew that like, the Metallica Napster lawsuit and everything, but I never realized that it came down to this shit Mission Impossible 2 single. So yeah, that's another interesting tidbit. And a lot of interesting tidbits in this movie. A lot of interesting little things that are locked in this movie. Hopkins never comes back. New metal never comes back. Like this version of Ethan never comes back. The next one, he's a family man. He's with Michelle Moynihan. It's a masterpiece, Mission Impossible 3. And Ethan Hunt's character in Mission Impossible 3 is like so well worked out. I guess that's like J.J. Abrams and everyone doing that, like just resetting everything. So there's just a lot that's in this film that's like locked away in the time capsule of Mission Impossible 2. I kind of feel like with Final Reckoning, there were like, I mean, you do see clips from Mission Impossible 2 in it, but they brought so much stuff back. I wish they had just done one little nod, a little line of dialogue or something to kind of re-honor MI2 and like bring it back into the broader lore in a way. But I think they're pretty much just ashamed of this movie and almost like deny its existence in a way. But I don't know. I think it's got value. I had a fun time with it, especially the second half. And yeah, I wonder when I'll next be watching a Mission Impossible movie. Final Reckoning, I think, has done well at the box office. So yeah, maybe in a few years' time it'll be time to be going back and revisiting the missions yet again.
Yeah, they actually asked Tandy Newton to come back for the third movie, and she thankfully declined, which led to the, I guess, Michelle Monaghan storyline. But maybe Tandy Newton could have been still part of the team. I don't know how they were going to work her in. But I think probably, other than maybe the first movie, Mission Impossible 3 is the most we get of Ethan the family man. It's actually, I think it's the best balance of personal stakes and world stakes. You mentioned that there's been stuff in most Mission Impossible movies that's been absolutely dog shit, and there's been a lot of wonderful stuff. I would argue Mission Impossible 1, Mission Impossible 3, Mission Impossible 4, Mission Impossible 5, and Mission Impossible 6 are pretty much perfect movies in what they set out to do. And 7, 8, and two are more so in line with the statement you said. Yeah, it is funny that this movie is set in Australia, and there's a lot of movies set in Australia around this time as well. So I wonder if there was some kind of filming grant they would get there. What do you think? There's been a lot of movies at the time, and I know they did that with England recently, and you'd see a lot of London doubling as the places in America in the 60s and stuff, because they give people grants to shoot in London. And I think a lot of Mission Impossibles have London scenes. And so I wonder, is there a bit of shrewdness to shooting it in London? Shooting it in Australia. But I think it just makes it lack a lot of personality in the set piece department and the aesthetics, much like the main villain in this. For the record, I wasn't saying that the entity was a better bad guy than this person, Doug Ray Scott. I'm just think even the entity, who's basically non-existent, has more personality than Doug Ray Scott in this. And I think there's two type of plot stories in movies. There's one, like in Mission Impossible 2, very simple. There's a line by Luther that even says, "Is that it? Is that the plot?" I think, is a reference to people found the plot in the first movie too complicated. So on paper, yeah, the plot of Mission Impossible 2 makes sense, I guess. Very logically, this is what happens. This guy has the virus. He wants to sell it. He wants to put on the stock market the money he makes and then turn it into billions. Okay, that makes coherent sense. Very fucking boring. Really boring. Then you have the Dead Reckoning movies. Plot does not make sense. There is no plot. But at least for all intents and purposes, there's no plot. It's not coherent. But at least it ties in with something I like about the movies, and that's I don't know how to phrase this. The false promise of magic. And there's a show like Lost that has the false promise of magic, and it sometimes delivers, but it ultimately lets you down. But the false promise of magic is a powerful thing, and I'm not saying it's a powerful thing in the Mission Impossible movies in the last two. It certainly isn't, but I'm saying if it comes down to it, logical, mundane plot, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I can see why someone's doing that. Or something that gives me a scene like Tom Cruise being strapped into that fucking 2001 in sequence time machine that makes not a lick of sense. It doesn't make any sense. It's not explained, but it does give me the promise of magic, even though by this point I know there will be no magic. I much prefer the promise of something that will never come and get a sequence like that. It's very stylistic. It works very well. Rather than my cat's just doing some Tom Cruise stunts of her own now, following this later. Yeah, I'd rather that than the Mission Impossible 2, but there's no real point in pitting them against each other. Although I probably framed it in that way in my first voice note, which I can't remember. You asked the question how I felt about the first time viewing this, which I didn't mention. The first time viewing this, I absolutely hated it. It was one of my early disappointments in cinema. I think Mario Brothers, Street Fighter, Mission Impossible 2, Star Wars, I think these were movies that even as a kid, I knew that there was something seriously wrong with the movie. And there are things seriously wrong with Mission Impossible 2. However, this time, much like you, there is a lot to like about it. There is a lot of very good action sequences, and I bet you had a much better time the second night. I bet you have to suffer through the abysmal first half of this movie in order to get your reward for that second half over the top action sequences. So if you just strapped yourself in the second night, you just got all the goodness in 45 minutes. You gotta suffer in the trenches. Watch this movie in one go. you gotta do your time in the trenches in real time. None of this fall into sleep stuff. What else was I going to say? Yeah, I didn't remember many of the sequences in this movie at all. So the mass stuff in this was very refreshing to me. We probably wouldn't have got this, but wouldn't it have been great if we had two Tom Cruises the whole movie and we didn't know who the person was under the mask that's impersonating him for half the movie? And maybe it's like a twist at the end, because I was really enjoying the few instances we got of Tom Cruise playing a bad guy in this. I thought it worked very well. And yeah, that sequence to begin with is very good in the cliff, just because of Tom Cruise's commitment to those stunts. And yeah, there was cables. And you mentioned about the Gandalf. No, I didn't say he turned this down for Lord of the Rings. I said he was meant to do Mission Impossible 2, but then he turned it down because he had a theatre commitment. But had he done it, Mission Impossible 2 would have overrun, and then we would not have got Ian McKellen as Gandalf. So the story goes. And it's interesting what you were saying about how Eyes Wide Shut, which I've never seen, killed Cruise's credibility as a romantic lead in that way. So there's two instances in which Tom Cruise has kissed somebody on screen, I think, in the last 25 years. One is Mission Impossible in 2000, and one is Emily Blunt in 2014. And I think in that relationship, they do a very good job of a romantic lead Tom Cruise, even in a rom-com type way as well, actually, because he's not the capable hero that we normally get. In fact, he's pretty fucking useless. Hence the premise of the film, when he gets to get better and better and better. And they share a kiss on screen. So I think that's the last time where they went as far as pushing it in terms of a credible romance instead of a suggestible romance. So let's not forget that movie. But yeah, it's hard. It's hard where to rank this movie, isn't it? Maybe I'd only put it as the second worst movie now at this point, just because the last 45 minutes of this movie, or however long, on the bike, like you so rightly identified, is excellent cinema. And like you said, if it was in a better movie, it would be heralded as one of the best action sequences there is, maybe. And I think these movies are always good to have in your back pocket as well. It's a shame that the first half is so fucking shit, because it puts you in a really bad mood and you're not on the side of the movie. But it is a credit that the movie wins you over somewhat. And I've downloaded The Killer, Face Off, Bullet in the Head, Hard Boiled, and what's the other one I've downloaded? Hard Target and Broken Arrow. I've downloaded a few of these movies legally, and I'm happy to have these type of movies in my collection, because it's good fun ultimately, this movie, isn't it? And it's not good fun in the Dead Reckoning kind of way where it tries to be good fun. This is good fun in a non-self-aware kind of way. I think this movie is trying to be cool more than good fun. Whereas the Dead Reckoning is trying to be good fun, but it fails at times. I mean, ultimately, now that I've seen this whole series, it's probably the series that gave me the most joy, even including the movies that are such a drop in quality, like the ones mentioned. I still think I had a good time with all of them, ultimately, in one way or another. And just to go back to the Tom Cruise or the Ethan Hunt, should I say, persona in this movie as well. It's not so much that he puts Thandie Newton in danger. It's just the way it's framed in how he's basically pimping her out. That's what he's tasked with doing. And she does say that she wants to do it, but that only comes up in conversation. Anthony Hopkins essentially tasks him with that mission. And he's reluctant, but he does go along with it. So I think that's an interesting wrinkle that he's basically pimping her out. But yeah, I might watch some more John Woo movies actually, which is probably a success of my rewatch of Mission Impossible 2 in its own right. That I have come away with that. And what else was I going to say? Oh yeah, just a final bit of trivia about the guy, because I was very curious. The guy who was part of the team, the Australian guy, played by a guy named John Polson. His last movie where he acted was Mission Impossible 2, up until recently, where he's done a movie called The Dry. I think is that with Eric Bana? Yeah. But he's actually become a director and directed a few episodes of The Wilds, which I think is a show that you watched. Is that the one? With maybe you haven't watched The Wilds. Thought that was the one with, maybe I'm getting it confused with something else. But he's become a director and he's directed stuff like The Walking Dead, Fear of Walking Dead. So it's amazing the way at a certain point around this time he decided, yeah, I'm not going to do this actor stuff anymore. But yeah, glad I went back to watch it. Glad I revisited it, and it's nice to go back to a movie that, even though it weighs heavily, you can't remember much about it, and you get to watch it with fresh eyes.
I think you mentioned there in your voice note that you haven't seen Eyes Wide Shut. I definitely make a point of watching that as soon as possible. I won't say any more than that about it, but yeah, that's one for you to check out. And yeah, interesting, that guy just basically starred in the biggest movie, well, not starred in, it's like 8th billing or whatever in the biggest movie of the year, and then it just stops acting straight away. Funny little career. Yeah, I think, I mean, obviously there's probably a lot that we agree on. There evidently is a lot that we agree on in this area. I think there's like key things that we very much don't agree on. Like you mentioned, you said in your voice note there that you think the plot of this movie is really boring. Like I can, other than high concept movies like The Matrix, where like the actual concept of the movie is genius. I think if you're just talking about like series of events like this type of movie, spy thriller, I don't really see how you get much better than this. Like, it's got twists and turns. It's got like so many scenes where you don't know what's happening, and then the like rug is pulled out from under your feet with the mask stuff. You've got a like believable central plot. Like, that's one thing I love in Die Hard, for example, is like what the villains are trying to do. It's like a story that like more is revealed over time. You get what their plan is. The pieces are falling into place of like what was their plan all along. And it's something you can buy. It's not like the cosmic orb or whatever that folds the universe in on itself. Like in this one, it's this, this chimera thing, and the other thing, which I can't remember the name of it, but the anti-chimera. And it was established, we find out like the backstory of that and who established it and who his boss was. And then that very thing is not just pure MacGuffin, because it actually has like lots of interaction with the events of the movie, with like Vandy Newton injecting into herself, and like how that changes the stakes. And I don't know, I think it's definitely one of the best mission plots for me. Like I would say probably the second best after the first one. And then also you don't have problems with a lot of the mission movies. It seemed like you mentioned that you think like Ghost Protocol, Rogue Nation, and Fallout are perfect movies for what they're setting out to do. I think that those movies have like major flaws. And I think that's a big part of why Mission 2 to me looks better and looks like it's got a kind of stronger position in the franchise than you do, where you're sort of like wavering between it's the worst one or whatever. Like I think Fallout has as bad of a script in terms of the plot as Dead Reckoning and Final Reckoning. It just has maybe the best action of the franchise, and it's got lots of charm, like lots of movie star charm from Henry Cavill, from Tom Cruise, and from the whole team. And there's just like loads of appealing aspects that are selling that movie. But in terms of like muddled plot and just nothing really kind of makes much sense, it's, I think, maybe not quite as guilty, but almost as guilty as the ones after, and maybe as guilty. I think the two before that, which I believe were the first two Chris McQuarrie movies, that Ghost Protocol is directed by Brad Bird, but I think McQuarrie had got on board then by that point as a writer. And then Rogue Nation, if I remember correctly, was the first written and directed by McQuarrie. I could be wrong on that one. I think that's the case. Those two movies, I remember feeling like they were really good, but they hadn't got to where Mission 3 was. Where Mission 3, for me, is pretty perfect because it's got that whole story that you care about. It's got like, it's just like Mission Impossible 1, with him losing his team and his mentor Jim Phelps and everything like that, and just like hit the pressures that he's under navigating the world. It felt like they lost that for Ghost Protocol and Rogue Nation, where they're a bit sort of lighter and meaningless, but the spectacle of those movies is phenomenal. The Burj Khalifa, the underwater, like, what is it, like a water-cooled server thing that he has to swim around in, like, and also Rogue Nation has got that cool plot stuff with the politics in the background, like what political organizations have been compromised and stuff like that. So I'm a massive fan of Ghost Protocol, Rogue Nation, and Fallout, but for me, most Mission Impossible movies have issues. I think Mission Impossible 1 and Mission Impossible 3 are probably the only two that for me don't have issues. And that's fine, because like, some of the best movies ever made have issues. Pulp Fiction has Quentin Tarantino acting in it. It's not really like too bad of a thing to say that a film has issues, but I think Mission Impossible 2, just to me, is in the mix of that conversation of most Mission Impossible movies, where it's about how detrimental to its quality are its issues. Like Fallout, massive issues, not detrimental to its quality for the most part. Like without those issues, yeah, it would be even better. But like it's about like how was the end picture when you put all this stuff together. So I think that makes me feel that MI2 is like it's definitely underrated for me. Like basically dismissed, where people I would say it's close to being not even considered part of the franchise. Like, that's how dismissed it is when people are like making their rankings, doing rewatches of the movies, just even thinking about the franchise, because obviously a lot of the later movies make references back to Mission Impossible 1 as well. So it's kind of the skipped one of the whole thing. In many ways, like, there's no cast members that are added in MI2 that stick around. The music and the style and everything wasn't continued into Mission Impossible 3. It's interesting hearing that Thandie Newton was asked back for the third movie. You were asking what would she be part of the team or what? I wonder, because the Michelle Moynihan character in Mission Impossible 3, and I adore Michelle Moynihan, and I think that is a perfect piece of casting that's 1,000 times more electric than anything we get between Cruise and Thandie. But that character in MI3 doesn't know that Ethan is a spy, right? That's the whole thing. It's like True Lies type of situation. They couldn't have done that plot if his wife had been Thandie Newton, but it would have made sense narratively, like in terms of the continuity of the series, that by the end of MI2, he's clearly in love and in a relationship with Thandie Newton, and then in the next movie he's married to someone. It would just kind of, if they were asking Thandie to come back, I doubt they were asking her to come back and not be the woman that he's married to. So either the script that they were asking her back to was just completely different to the MI3 script, or her saying that she wouldn't come back made them rewrite that character as not Thandie Newton, but another woman who doesn't know that Ethan is a spy. So she might have inadvertently created one of the best things that the franchise has ever had. And you mentioned you were, I don't know if you were reading this from a website or if you were just using your memory, but you said that there's only been 2 people that he's kissed on screen. I say people, obviously it's Tom Cruise. It's going to be women, 2 women that he's kissed on screen in the past 25 years. And it's this movie and Emily Blunt in Edge of Tomorrow. But does he not kiss Michelle Moynihan in MI3? And I also feel like I'm surprised he doesn't kiss his wife in American Made, because American Made, one of the elements of it was there was like more of a edgier or indie vibe type of cruise movie. And Night and Day is like a Mr. and Mrs. Smith style rom-com action flick as well. So that feels like it would be in there. And Vanilla Sky, even, I feel like with Penelope Cruz, I feel like there's, but everything that comes to mind when I think about him, except for the Michelle Moynihan one, but all of the other ones, there is zero sparks flying. Like him and Cameron Diaz in Night and Day, there is zero chemistry. Like there's no sex appeal. Like, they're obviously both incredibly good looking, but there's no, like, you just don't buy that that's a relationship. And I literally didn't even remember that they had attempted any kind of romance in Edge of Tomorrow. That's how, and I've seen that movie a few times and I love that movie, but like, it's almost just like he couldn't be in a relationship. I think Oblivion also has like a kind of love triangle thing with Andrea Riseborough and Olga, whatever her name is. Still, like, neither relationship you buy. So there's something there, like, again, he built his career to some extent on that, like, relationship element, that romance element of movies. But he's always had this kind of otherworldly quality that separates him from his contemporaries like Brad Pitt and stuff, and separates him from every other character in the movies that he's in, where he's like hyper other level. Like, I can't even find the right words to articulate it, but something about this sort of heightened godlike thing, like God as in like, Thor, like old school, like mythological character, that maybe when you put in something as human as a relationship, it doesn't work. If you do Eyes Wide Shut, where you're subverting that in a way, then it does work. But even like, or like Jerry Maguire, where a large part of that movie is he's really nice, Renee Zellweger's really nice, they both really care about each other, but the relationship can't work because he can be a great like mentor to her kid, and he can be a person of immense value, but like on a human to human regular relationship type thing is not something that he can deliver on. Now, then at the end of the movie, they did the whole like "you have me at hello" thing and everything, but you still almost kind of feel like that won't work. And there's something about him, and it's sad because it's obviously it's the case in real life as well, where he's seems to have given up on that. Like, not to go too much into like, parasocial relationship with Tom Cruise, but there's some disconnect that he has between himself and other people, where like if you and I could meet Tom Cruise because we happen to be like walking through London and we met him, and he would like shake our hand, put his hand on our shoulder, look into our eyes, like really make us feel special and connected. But he could no, I can't imagine Tom Cruise ever like going round to a friend's house late at night and just like putting his feet up and shooting the shit with them. He's like disconnected from people, and that kind of intimacy and disconnect kind of like is evident in his movies. And there's that is a very long waffly way of trying to like get my head around the fact that like the greatest movie star of all time has, for the whole second half of his career, not been able to make romance elements work. And you're right in saying that a lot of films were shot in Australia back then. I remember there was a lot of tax cuts for shooting in Australia and shooting in New Zealand, and a lot of productions happened there, but they were almost always pretending it was America or pretending it was somewhere else in the world. Like New Zealand, I remember, was used for The Last Samurai for Japan, and that type of thing happened a lot. The Matrix movies are filmed in Australia as well, but this one is it's saying it's Australia. And of course you got the Sydney Opera House, like the bits where you kind of like bring out the big guns, but for the most part I feel like it's just not an exotic backdrop, and you're missing something there that other mission films have. And it's interesting to hear that you hated this film the first time you saw it. I had a lot of those like disappointments back then. Star Wars was less of a disappointment because I think I saw the prequels before I saw the older movies, the original trilogy, and even the original trilogy I'm not particularly a fan of. But Matrix Reloaded, I remember when that was coming out, I was like convinced that was going to be the best film ever made, and incredibly crestfallen when its true form was revealed to me. And there's definitely a few ones from that era. But Mission 2, I don't know, I had a good time with it. I saw it in the cinema, 14 years old, probably like a bit younger than when I would be like cynical about things. As I said, it didn't set my world on fire. It's not like that was one of the even top 50 movies from my childhood in terms of like me absolutely buzzing after having seen it, but it was definitely, I thought it was cool, and I still think it's cool. I think you've mentioned a few times like the first half of the movie sucks. I think the opening sequence on the plane is pretty cool. I think the mountain climbing sequence after that is very cool, and then he goes, "Meet me in Seville in 2 days," Hopkins says. He comes there and he has that meeting, with Hopkins, just like, "It's not mission difficult, Ethan." What does he say? "It's mission impossible, not mission difficult. Difficult should be a walk in the park," or something like that. That's fun. Like, it's stupid, it's silly, it's like fucking borderline Austin Powers, but it's fun. And then it goes pretty weak. Like, I think after that, anything to do with Andy Newton, and anything to do with sort of setting the scene with Dougray Scott, and then you get to like the horse racing scene, and it's like, that is good by the standards of what we've seen so far, but it's not enough to be the big sort of exciting scene of like a whole like third of the movie or whatever. So yeah, but then it too much of the movie is really good for me to like be hard on it, I guess. And yeah, oh yeah, the one last thing I wanted to touch on, you talked about how like it'd be interesting if we'd got more of the two Tom Cruises, because we get, you know, I think there's 3 times in the movie where Tom Cruise isn't Ethan Hunt. The opening airplane thing, that scene behind Dougray Scott's house with Andy Newton, and then that bit where they shoot the henchman. He's, you know, it's not really Tom Cruise. Like, considering how good of a trick that is, and it's like normally doing the same trick 3 times in a movie would like, that would be way over the top. I think they get away with it here. Like, it's every time it's a slightly different situation and it works really well. But considering how good of a trick it is, it's amazing how little we've seen that. Like, I love the mask gags, even the one that's in the beginning of Final Reckoning when they go rescue Pom, whatever her name is. Like, mask gags are always good fun, but they rarely do them anymore. They almost always tell us who's in the mask before the scene starts, rather than have it as a reveal. I know it would get old pretty quick if they were just constantly doing it, but I don't think there's that many examples of Tom Cruise not being Ethan Hunt in these movies, and there's no example, as far as I'm aware, after 8 movies, of Tom fighting Tom, because one of them has the mask on, and like people are like, don't know which one to shoot and stuff like that. So yeah, bit of a unmined terrain there that is in this movie and could be explored more. But yeah, I had a really good time with it. I'm glad to have checked it out. And now, having watched Dead Reckoning, Final Reckoning, and Mission Impossible 2, all in the space of a couple of weeks, I'm very much missioned out for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, you know what? It's not so much a good trick. It's just that Cruise is so good at playing a different version of himself that it just makes it work every time. It's not so much the trick to get away with it. It's just Cruise is brilliant at it. And I kind of wonder, is that like a precursor to Collateral? Did somebody watch this and think, oh, maybe Tom Cruise is a bad guy? I mean, I know they would have seen him in, what's it called? Interview with the Vampire. But that's a different type of thing. But yeah, regarding the Tom Cruise kissing fact, it seems like our very own entity has taken over the fucking facts, because yeah, apparently if you just type in something into Google now, there's this weird AI that generates answers. But unlike ChatGPT, who's like some bit reliable, this fucking, and at least you go to ChatGPT, you know, to ask a question. But now on Google, there's some fucking entity motherfucker who's hijacked it and just threw out this fact when I was trying to find an answer. And it just said, oh yeah, he's only been kissed 2 people, like pulling facts out its fucking arse. So yeah, don't trust the Google entity helpful widget or whatever it is. Yeah, that scene with Hopkins is quite good. All right, I said it's Mission Impossible, Tom. No, what does he say again? It's mission. It's called Mission Impossible, not Mission Very Hard or something like that. Like Hopkins phoning it in since '92, but still able to deliver some great dialogue. Yeah, so you're not gonna go back and check the TV show. Well, yeah, the other thing is what you're saying about Metallica. I think that's the only time they ever did an original song for a movie soundtrack as well, which is a IMDb fact, not a Google entity fact. So who knows if that's fucking true. But yeah, you're all missioned out. I feel like maybe I could go to Mission Impossible 3 again at this point. But I've got my John Woo-it-on as well, so we'll see.
Your mailbox is full. Please delete new or stored messages which you no longer need so that new messages may be received.